Hey, what's up, Shining Otaku? It's Cloud9 here today with yet another Your Manga Sucks Writing Edition video. Today we're going to talk a bit about whether or not there's such thing as having too many characters in a story. Now, the short answer of that is going to be no. But there is such thing as having too many characters that you're focusing on at one given time. What I mean by that is you don't want to have so many characters that you're introducing at one particular point and trying to focus on each of those characters to the point where your actual objective with that story arc is being lost because now you have a bunch of other threads and other stories that you're trying to tell at one particular point. Here's an example of that. So if you're writing a story and let's say the main character is Bob and Bob wants to be a chef, and Bob's whole point is that Bob wants to learn how to cook and he's gonna go and compete in, let's say, the Iron Chef competition, if that's even a thing anymore, or maybe more accurate would probably be like Master Chef, whatever chef competition they have going on now. What you don't want to do is have Bob go on this journey of looking to be on, let's say, for example, Master Chef, but you introduce 10 other characters along with Bob, right? Which you can do and you should do, right? But you don't want to now focus on these other story arcs of these other characters to the degree where we have now begun to forget that Bob was even the main character. So if let's say you have Bob and you have Ross and you have Sue and you have all these other characters start to appear, you need to make sure that all of this is being used as a way to be able to develop Bob. Not to say that these other characters aren't developing in their own fashions, which of course is important, but if this is supposed to be Bob's story arc, then you need to make sure that you're continuing to focus on Bob. Or if you're going to have a couple other characters that you're going to focus on, let's say you have three like main supporting characters, then you want to make sure that you're developing those characters and Bob and not focusing on telling all the intricate details of all the other characters who don't really play an important role at that moment. Now, to center this more home to manga, I would give an example of a tournament structure arc. That's probably the most common example of something that would be used or used to introduce a ensemble of characters into a story at a given time. And a famous example of that would be Yu Yu Hakusho with the Dark Tournament arc. Now, I know a lot of y'all gotta love the Dark Tournament arc because the Dark Tournament arc is definitely one of my favorite, and it's probably one of the most well done tournament arcs in Shonen. Like, we're not even going to get into how overused the tournament arc structure is done, but this is a time where actually it was done pretty well, and there's nothing wrong with it within itself. I mean, heck, I would be a hypocrite to say that there's something wrong with doing a tournament arc because I do one myself with Gods of Life. But in any case, when you're doing a tournament arc, you want to make sure, for example, Yu Yu Hakusho, you see it's about Team Urameshi, or Yusuke more specifically, overcoming Team Toguro or Toguro. And of course, Yusuke himself at this point in the story has learned, or you can say is still learning, about the whole purpose of protecting his friends and protecting the people that he met, to be more specific, that have kind of developed or are developing at this point in the story to become more of like his friends. From the previous story arc that we had. So you of course have his character being challenged in that way. But when you're going through each part of the tournament arc, or I guess you could say each fight, or each fight that takes place within the tournament arc, it serves as a way to be able to challenge the main character in more ways so that they're developed enough to be able to take on the challenge at the end of that story arc. In other words, Yusuke's challenges that he faces throughout the Dark Tournament arc are a way to be able to develop his character enough to where his character will now be ready to be able to face, in this case, Toguro. But I'm not just talking about in like a power strength. I think a lot of times, a lot of us, of course, if you love, your big, awesome shonen fights like myself, you think about it in a sense sometimes where okay, he has to be literally strong enough to do it. But no, I'm not talking about in terms of the lore of the story or the power set. I'm talking about in terms of his character has to develop in ways to where he is now able to overcome the inner struggles within himself, to be able to overcome to be a different character than he was at the beginning of that arc. He cannot be the same Yusuke that you saw in the beginning of that tournament arc, or he shouldn't be the same Yusuke. He should be a different Yusuke at the end of the tournament arc if you're developing him, or if you're trying to evolve him. And that's for better or for worse. That's the whole purpose of the arc, of course. Now, not to get into how arcs should be structured exactly, that's not the purpose of this video. If you're having a bunch of characters that you're focusing on too many time, or at too much time, where you're introducing all these new characters and they're all amazing and you want everybody to know how amazing they are and every little detail behind them, then it can detract from what that main character is doing. It makes it seem like their struggle is of less importance, and if it's of less importance, then it's going to become of less importance to the reader. So you just want to make sure that you're not, if you're introducing a bunch of characters, you're just introducing them, which is what the purpose of a tournament arc is. The reader is basically kind of doing a high buy, or I should say the main character is kind of doing a high buy on probably a lot of those new characters that you're introducing. You might leave little seeds for the future that you can recapitalize later on down in further arcs, or little things that about little nuggets of information that might be interesting to see later on down the line. For example, with the final arc of Yu Yu Hakusho, using that as another example, of course, we see some of those characters from the tournament reappear again. And you might find out information, of course, too. But again, it should never become to the point where now, one of, like, for example, Bui's story has become so important. If you know Yu Yu Hakusho, you know what I'm talking about with Bui. His story is becoming now so important to the point where now we're not even worried about what Yusuke is doing or Hiei or any of them. We're just focused on Bui. And now at the end of the tournament arc, you're not even sure where the story is going to head. Not in a good way either. Because at the end of the day, you pretty much forgot who the main character was. This is kind of a side note, but this is on track to my point. So just bear with me just for a moment here. If you've ever seen the parody Too Many Cooks on Adult Swim, it's very old. So a lot of you guys may not have seen it. That's the best way I can summarize what you don't want to do. Now, it's a parody, so of course it didn't do anything wrong. But if it's not a parody and you're trying to write a story that's not a parody and you're doing it in the fashion that Too Many Cooks was done, then that's the wrong way to take your story. That's the perfect example of introducing too many characters at one particular time. I'll go ahead and link that so you guys can check it out. But it's a pretty funny parody that kind of parodies 90s or 80s and 90s sitcom intros, and it introduces literally several casts of characters only for the end of that parody to show like a father walking into a room full of people saying, "Honey, I'm home" at the very end. So, and then saying "to be continued." You don't want your story to feel so lost to the point where we don't know where we're heading anymore. Anyway, guys, that pretty much concludes this video of Your Manga Sucks Writing Edition. That pretty much concludes this video of Your Manga Sucks Writing Edition. If you guys are new to Shining Otaku and you enjoy manga tutorial videos, if you want to check out some of the awesome comics that we publish, and you also enjoy checking out interviews from other creators out across the globe, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss anything, and hit the bell so you get any notifications when we upload. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching, or listening in this case, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.